Hello and happy Tuesday. I am coming to you from Mexico, or speaking to you from Mexico. I'm excited to talk about underrated ways to improve your training today, and I'm looking forward to hearing Laura's input on this as well. But as we all know, we can always get better in training, no matter how advanced we are, no matter how long we have been training. There's always room to improve. So I'm excited for her to join me here in a second. I'm sending her an invitation now. But yeah, I'm thoroughly enjoying trying different gyms here as well. Hi, Laura. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Lisa. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. It's lovely to speak to you today, and I think we have some different but yet maybe same perspectives on this topic today. So I'm looking forward to hearing your recommendations or ways of potentially improving training in ways that might be underrated. Because most of the time, I think when we hear how to improve training, we hear certain things like you gotta push harder or find a gym buddy or something like that, which is underrated. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have come up with. What was one of the first things that popped into your mind?
Well, one of the first things was recovery. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons is I'm not very strong in this suit is the recovery. So, and we could personalize this on where you kind of land on the training spectrum. Obviously, there's advanced trainers or beginner trainers. However, one of the things that first came up for me was how can I improve my training? One of them is recovery, and I see it more of as active recovery. And one of those is yoga, which incorporates the stretching and the calming down the stress, the central nervous system. So that is one of the things that initially popped in for me. This is a very broad category, so where do we start?
No, but I love it. I think you're raising a really good point, which I didn't even think of, and that was increasing mobility or range of motion, rather. I think sometimes we meet people that are really flexible, but they don't actually have good mobility in the sense that they don't have control over that range of motion. And then we encounter other people that like are super strong, but they're not utilizing the full range of motion. So I actually really like that you incorporated yoga, or just in general a mobility aspect in there, and a recovery overall. Obviously, also I do think this is so tricky in the sense of finding the right training frequency. So one of the points that I wrote down, which perhaps falls into this category, is changing the training split that you're doing. So, if you're someone who has always done 5 or 6, or let's say like a 6-day body part split, maybe shifting to a push-pull legs approach could be better. Or if you're someone who has always done a full body part split, changing to an upper lower could just change something up. So I think often we're so stuck, and like I'm totally talking about this from personal experience. Sometimes we're so stuck in like, oh, I've always done this and that and it just works for me. But if we're being honest, like, do we know if it really works for us? Because maybe something else would be working better. So, even just for like 2-3 months, saying instead of doing an upper lower split, I'm going to do push pull legs or a body part split or so. Maybe you're recovering better from that. Who knows?
Yeah, I agree. And one of the other things that I found benefits with yoga, just to backtrack just a little bit, is the balance issue. And that really, I find that helps with my training program when you're doing single leg deadlifts and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to backtrack on that. And then on your point, I always have the mentality of train legs on Monday, train legs on Monday. So I always have kind of a lower body program trained on Monday, and it could be as hard as it is on the mental aspect. It could be starting there. A simple swap would be, okay, I'm going to train an upper on Monday and then a lower, and then as you mentioned, maybe it's push pull or upper lower split, whatever that might be.
Totally. Yeah, I agree on both of those points. The balance and more like the deep core musculature parts, because again, we always hear like, oh, you got to lift heavy, you got to push to failure. And I mean, I'm the first one to say that also, but then we're sometimes neglecting those deep, profound, like the pelvic floor muscles, for instance, or so. So yeah, like, I mean, if I think back, and this is like quite vulnerable, but I've shared this before. If I think back to my CrossFit days, you know, I was like deadlifting, I don't want to say easily, but I was deadlifting like 220 pounds for 10 reps, no issue, more or less. But then when it comes to doing double unders, so like skipping, after a couple of minutes of skipping, I would be leaking, like literally. So like, you know, and I mean, I'm someone, I haven't had a child. I haven't had any like pelvic floor, quote unquote, let's call them excuses or whatever. But there was at the height of it, there was a competition with double unders in it, and literally at the end of the competition was like a puddle underneath of me. And like that just to say that even if you think you're strong, like it doesn't mean that the profound, the deep muscles are necessarily there. Like I realized that at some point and thought, okay, either I have an overactive pelvic floor, which sometimes also causes or can cause leakage, or I just don't know how to activate it, or I don't know how to keep it activated, but there was some sort of issue going on there. So yeah, really good point with the deep musculature there.
Well, I'm glad that you said that, Lisa, because let's be realistic. If you're not comfortable or confident in the gym, you're not going to do those lifts. And it's the same, I can very much relate, not to get like, getting a little bit older, your body is changing post-child, even though I'm 8 years post, like things are not working like they used to. And that is discouraging. If you want to start running or even warming up on a treadmill, that can deter you from doing those things. Or like you mentioned, skipping or box jumps, those sort of things. So I really like that you pointed that out, because it might be starting with, okay, so let's identify where my weaknesses are and start incorporating some exercises that can help with increasing your strength in those exercises.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I'm glad that you also said that, hey, even just because you are 8 years postpartum or so, it doesn't mean that everything went back to prior or is like totally fine now. We still might have issues or things that we just continue to work on as time goes by also.
Yeah, yeah. And then another way to improve your training or to change things up is the tempo, in the sense of slowing down the movement and being, I know that you've experienced this, especially in the last couple of years, as you are more focusing on the bodybuilding and the mind muscle connection. And this is always a top priority when I'm training someone, is let's go through the movements and engage the proper muscles. And even if you're a trained, seasoned athlete, let's break it down, go through the movements really slowly, and you would be surprised once you get those muscles activated, how much more strength you can gain, even just mobility within that region as well.
That's such a good point. And again, one that I didn't even think of, but have certainly very much experienced in the last couple of years or year and a half. And like I continue to learn. Like today, I just angled, I had a back day, and the machines here, one of the joys of like trying different gyms, the machines here have a bit of a different angle than the one that I used for pull downs in Colombia. And I was like, whoa, I can feel my rhomboids. I've never actually like felt them, or like now I can switch it over, can feel it switching over to that. So like totally good point. And I would not have been able to do that if I would have gone through the movement quickly. And so yeah, really good point with regards to the tempo. I had a funny thought also, and I do think that can sometimes really help improve our training. Changing up the training time, not necessarily like if you already have a good time where you're like, no, I know that this is my height of the day, but like again, also like years ago, I used to think that afternoon is the best time for me to train because I've already had some food within me, and it's the end of my work day, so I don't have to think of what is next or anything like that. And then I was kind of like forced almost to train earlier in the day. I don't remember why specifically. And it took took an adjustment period. Like I would say the first maybe 2 to 4 weeks were probably hard, where I thought, oh, I'm just not a morning person, or like I never thought I'm not a morning person, but I'm just not a morning workout person. Um, and now I love it. Like I cannot think of anything different. But I think sometimes we're so stuck in like what we have been doing. And even just saying for 2 weeks, I'm going to train in the afternoon or I'm going to train in the late morning. If we have the flexibility, I think that can sometimes make a big difference.
Yeah, I agree. I've been battling with that as well. It's like, can I plan? I'm the same with you, first thing in the morning. I get it done, and then it's done it's done for that day. So that yeah, that's my preference. I've thought about, can I switch my workouts to a little bit later so I can get some food in, but I can't seem to pull the trigger on that. I'll also say that I have some clients that were so resistant to training first thing in the morning, and now they're going and they love it. They're actually more consistent with going to the gym. So on top of that is, when is it more realistic for you in order to be consistent with that gym time? Because then when
Definitely.
your body might get used to it. However, isn't that more optimal than not going at all?
And yeah, you already also mentioned with that, something else that came to mind for me is changing up pre and post workout nutrition. So particularly post workout, I would say I would assume, or I think from experience, that a lot of women don't include enough easily absorbed carbs, particularly in their post workout meal. Like it might just be, you rush to work and you might grab a protein bar, but that protein bar has like 15 to 20 grams of carbs and not very high quality either. So is it better than nothing? Yes. Is it better than grabbing a muffin go at the drive-through or whatever? Yes. But is it optimal? No. And if we're talking about like underrated ways to optimize, I do think that or like it could also just be like, hey, you're on a plant-based diet, you're only just sort of getting to your protein goal, and now you're starting to include EAAs or so in your pre-workout or in your workout drink or with your meals also could make a difference.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you said that, because nutrition is, especially post-workout, is so valuable. And it could be as simple as a protein shake with cereal. Like,
Yes.
break it down into what is really, really easy for you. And even just incorporating that after your workouts, if that's the only thing you change, just see how much change you feel in your body over time.
Yeah, and the other thing that you mentioned with your clients, I mean, you say they were resistant at first, or you help them, slow down the tempo. I think sometimes even just booking like 2-3 sessions with a personal trainer can be so helpful. Like honestly, even if you've been training yourself for 10 years, do it. It might just be like a different perspective. It might be a different way of training. It might be someone who's telling you to breathe differently. It might be someone who's telling you to push harder. I know that the sessions are not cheap, but I think they really can go a long way, even if it's like once or twice a year and you do that, or just once a year and you go through the movements or the body parts that you struggle the most with. I think that can really be, even if it's just a one-off, it can be a good way to break through a plateau or to learn something new.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you know what? I recommend this to any offline or online clients that I have.
Yes.
Just invest a couple sessions with a good trainer to ensure that you have the proper, you're engaged in the proper muscles. So yeah, I'm really glad that you pointed that out. And also with the tempo, something that I recognize is, as kind of I'm trudging through a bit of an injury, is when you have less weight on the bar, for example, and you slow down the tempo, it may be a little bit more conducive to where your body is at. So I have lower back issues. There's nothing wrong with weighted back squats. However, I'm focusing more on reducing the weight, slowing down the tempo so that I can start to heal a little bit more optimally.
Yeah, and I mean, in the end, it's not so much with the back squat, for instance.
Right.
You don't actually want to load your spine that much. You really want to. Where do you want to feel it? You want to feel it in your quads. You want to feel it in your glutes. So as long as that might mean you have a higher rep count, or again, you slow your movements down so that you quote unquote feel the burn more or so, but you're not feeling it as much in your spine. So I think yeah, really, really good point there also. Another thing that came to mind for me, which was also reasonably new to me with this more like bodybuilding type focused training, was pre-exhaust sets. So I mean, of course, yes, warming up or activating or priming or whatever you want to call it, I've always been aware of that. But pre-exhaust sets I have not done. So those of you that are not familiar with it, let's just say I am planning to do squats, but I personally have issues activating my glutes. So for instance, what you can, or what I did in this program also, would be doing a bunch of like Roman chair glute ham raises and hip abductions to really, really like feel almost not burn out my glutes, but like to a high level of exhaustion, particularly with these isolation movements for my glutes. And then I'm going to do my squats. Am I going to be able to lift as heavy as I would without having done them? Maybe not, but I'm definitely able to do them more while feeling my glutes. So yeah, that's just a method I have found quite interesting.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also activation, especially for me personally, I for many, many years, I've been training for over 20 years, is activating my glutes before a glute workout, like the hip thrust, for example. It could be banded walks. So ensuring that you're engaging the proper muscles while it kind of goes hand in hand with the pre-exhaust, is really even just warming up the transverse abdominis, the core muscles, the deep core, so that when you go into those movements, you feel really strong and activated because most, as we know, most heavy lifts or most lifts, you're using your core.
No, that's totally right. Yeah, definitely like skimping on the warm up. And I always say that it doesn't have to be long, but doing something like 5 minutes or so beforehand where you're just like generally activating the muscles that you want to focus on in that particular session, I think is super helpful. So yeah, I'm curious for specifically for glutes, what are some of your favorite, since you're home gym based, and I mentioned 2 machines, so let's talk about some home gym possibilities for activating the glutes also. What are some of your favorite exercises for that, and then maybe also for the lats as well?
That's a really good question. I like to use bands because everybody can have access to bands, and like I mentioned before, the band walks, so either like front and back, and even just kickbacks. You don't even need a band. You can just really squeeze your glute, and your leg will follow. It's not using your leg. It's really it could be a very, very small movement. It could be a couple inches, just activating that glute one side at a time. I really like unilateral, even Cossack lunges or lateral lunges, where you push more so you feel it more in your posterior chain, because then you're getting the lateral movement as well. So hip bridges, those sort of things, and even single leg hip bridges, single leg ball roll-ins, those are a little bit more taxing. But so those are really good ones. And lats, again, bands. I like to use bands and really just activating the lats. So single arm, bent over, overhead. You can use dumbbells, right? So
Awesome.
yeah, there are quite a few, but yeah, those are good ones to activate for sure.
Yeah, and what I wanted to point out was you said really squeezing a particular muscle and that you don't even need bands. And I think that's such a big point, like intent, the way that we approach a certain exercise, especially during the pandemic, like training from home. I think that that's something we could really, or I could really see and feel there, that you can make any exercise quite hard. Like you can do a plank and you can just kind of like hang there and be like, oh, when is the time over? Or you can do a plank and like tense and squeeze everything, and after 20 seconds you're exhausted. So like that intention, I hear so often, oh, I don't feel that, or like I don't, this is not so hard, like this exercise doesn't do anything for me. Sometimes you need to squeeze and activate first, and then you feel. You can't like be like, oh, I feel that and then I squeeze, if that makes sense. And I mean, we all, again, like I'll be the first one to say this, we all have muscle groups that we struggle to activate or to feel, but just generally that squeezing really helps with the mind muscle connection, I believe.
Yeah, when when I train a person in person, I say, where's your head at? Before we even start, where's your head at? I know you have a million things on your list. Can you release that? Release your ego, release your list at the door. Can we be here for 45, 60 minutes and really work on this program? And that's how I encourage everybody to start. What, not only like you have intentions for your workout, but where is your head? If you're distracted, you could possibly injure yourself if you're just going through the motions and you're lifting too heavy. So on top of that point, I think it's just a really good idea to just identify where's your mindset at. If you're really distracted, lower the weight. It's not worth it.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes we do need to be so honest with ourselves and like put the ego back and recognize, hey, I slept like crap.
Yeah.
Today might not be the best day to work out at all. Maybe I'm just going to go for a walk or whatever it might be. So yeah, really being open and honest with ourselves there. I had a couple more things. Oh yeah, so other ways, underrated ways to potentially improve training would be to not just switching body part splits or the training split that we do, but switching up the rep range as well. I think again, like we get so stuck in a particular range where we think, oh, this is what I always do or what works for me, or so I always do between 10 and 12 or whatever. But then maybe for a few weeks switching to almost only doing 20 reps, or which sounds horrible in my opinion, but you know, that's probably why I should do it.
I'm gonna challenge you just for 1 week. Oof.
20 for everything. Oh my gosh, yes. Well, why not? I should try it. And then maybe the following week doing 6 for everything instead of 8. So like really just like doing something different. And muscles do like or respond really well to the unknown. Like I have no doubt that if I switch to just 20 reps with every single thing, I would be pretty sore for a while, even though I would have to lower my weights on everything. And then going from that after a few weeks to doing 5 or 6 reps on everything, I would be pretty sore. And not that soreness is always a great measure of progress, but it would just be a sign for the novelty that my body has to adapt to. So yeah, that could be a great way. And of course, I do also say that, you know, if you have the possibility of every now and then switching up your training or going to a gym, like if you always train at home and you do have the possibility and you're really feeling stuck, going to a gym and just looking at a different machine here and there or trying a different machine can sometimes help. Or if you have a home gym and you have the possibility to add a particular piece of equipment, that can sometimes not just for the novelty factor and like make it more interesting, but also yeah, especially if you have been struggling with that body part in particular, I do think that it can be helpful.
Yeah, I agree. One other thing that I thought of are incorporating some explosive movement. So like it doesn't have to be complicated or too intense. Could be some thrusters instead of a standing shoulder press. It could be right like those sort of things where you do a ball toss or some box jumps, just to include some of those explosive movements. Those can help with the big lifts too.
Totally.
I think.
Yeah, plyometrics for sure, super helpful. I found, especially also again, if you're limited with equipment, that can be such a good way to add that extra level of challenge. Let's just say, like whenever I've done hotel workouts or something like that, I almost always do like jumping lunges or jumping squats, because of course you don't have the load, and that way it's just a different stimulus. So really cool, like that you thought of that also.
Yeah, I like that you said that you were adapting to your environment, and that could be temporary, and that could be a little bit of a long term if you're traveling. Like sometimes you do actually do really well with planning out where you stay so that you're close to a gym. But if you're ever in those moments, I remember when you were in the pandemic, you were stuck in your hotel and you're like, what am I doing? What do I do? So you were able to shift and adapt and try to take yourself out of the misery of not being able to train, but trying to find other ways to move your body.
Exactly. Some ways. And the funny thing is that often if we do that, like you or I were people that were like, oh my gosh, am I gonna lose my gains in that short amount of time? But the funny thing is that we often actually come back stronger because we finally give our body a little bit of an unwanted deload, I guess, or unintentional deload rather.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of last things I thought of were just, I guess, the last thing, hydration. Yeah, I think most people are probably not heading into their workout hydrated enough, particularly if that's later in the day. You might have had like a coffee before, but then that's kind of like a little bit of a diuretic as well. So making sure you're well hydrated going into the training, but then also, I mean, we don't need to drink excessively during our training, more according to thirst. We definitely don't want to overhydrate. But yeah, I would say the majority of people don't drink enough.
Yeah, I agree.
So
And it helps with lubricating the joints. It helps with like we need those electrolytes so that they're electrodes in your body so that your body can be a little bit more electrifying, let's say. So yeah, that's a really good point.
yeah, so I think I'm just to round it off. You started us off so well in saying that, hey, rest and recovery definitely the most underrated performance enhancing tools when it comes to our training. The next on that pyramid would be making sure you're eating enough, you're eating the right thing. But then, once that is covered and you're like, hey, I haven't done anything different in terms of work, or nothing, is out of the ordinary when it comes to that, and still I feel like I'm kind of like plateauing. I hope we gave some good ideas in the sense of changing up rep ranges, changing up body part splits, but also changing up tempos, or just I think the overarching theme really was changing things up and not just sticking with what you're doing and hoping that after a while there will be different results. Of course, to an extent, we just need to be patient and keep pushing and keep basically overloading. But at the same time, we do every now and then want to try something different. So even if it's once a year, changing our training split for a couple of months or changing our rep range, I think that can often go a long way.
Yeah, and on top of that, could be investing in a different training program that you are interested in, because having that accountability and proper progression, that could really, really help too.
Yeah, absolutely. And like on that front, it pays off knowing yourself. And for example, you've said this a number of times, like you need a little bit of variety. You get bored easily, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it would be wrong if every week you would be like, that's called program hopping, where you try something, you're like, oh, this is boring, or and then you change to the next thing. You actually give something a good shot, let's say minimum of like 8-12 weeks type of thing, and then, hey, I feel like something different, I want something different. And the cool thing is also that almost with every program you'll learn something new. Like there would be, even if it's not a brand new exercise, but it might be a different pairing that allows you to feel that particular muscle better, or a different superset where you're like, oh, this really gave me the burn, or like something like this. We learn something from every program. So you also, as a coach, I find that super helpful.
Yes. Yeah. Likewise. Very well said, Lisa. I agree.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. I really enjoyed your insights in this, and hopefully everyone also gets something out of this. If they have any other tips or things that help them improve their own training, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lisa. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
See you soon.